when I was smaller, my dad always dragged us out on these adventures into the wilderness and, you know, really extreme adventures like dad adventures, you know, just hours and hours in the Welsh rain. And, you know, I kind of really hated it. And then my very good friend was murdered, and I was, I think, 28, something like that. And I took to nature as a refuge. It was like an instinct, an intuition I had to just retreat to nature. And it was then I started to feel its healing, that kind of healing energy. You know, it was a very raw, broken, uncensored phase of my life where you've got no defenses, and maybe it's then that, you know, I was able to really pick up on that healing energy of the great outdoors.
What led you to the path of arbory?
Well, I mean, the honest answer to that is a load of ayahuasca. Yeah, I mean, that's the honest truth, actually. I was living in Brazil at the time, and I was in a real stagnant point in my life where my entire education and career at that point had been as a scientist, as a human scientist, a lab-based scientist. And I knew I didn't want to continue down that road. And yet I'd found myself working on this cattle ranch in Brazil in the pandemic. And again, I just retreated to nature and being outdoors and learning about the trees. But I was very, very unhappy, very depressed, very lonely, very disconnected in myself. I was drinking a huge amount of alcohol from morning to night, and I knew I had to do something. And so I decided to take ayahuasca. I was really nervous about it. I'd never done anything like that before in my life. I'd never been a recreational partier. I was always into sports and school and doing well. And so it was, you know, in my late 30s, I was about to go and trip balls. And it was a bit, you know, it was really terrifying. But I had an extremely illuminatory experience, very difficult. For about 8 hours, I was in a completely different plane of consciousness. But when I came out of it, and I was like, yeah, Jesus, I'm still alive, that was a definite bonus. But I was like, oh, I'm going to be a tree surgeon. And I didn't know what a tree surgeon was. I didn't know what an arborist was. I'd never seen one. But I started looking into it, and I found a course in Brazil for arborists, and I learnt to climb out in Brazil, and I never even questioned the path. I was like, I know that this is what I'm here to do, learn about trees, learn to communicate with trees, learn to care for trees. And it had given me this consciousness that is within the plant realm, the tree realm. It had given me a why, like a purpose for my life. And then slowly my health, my mental health was just dissolving. And I knew I had to come back to the UK. It was a double-edged sword. It was like I wanted to retrain in this craft that I felt was very purposeful for me, but at the same time my mental state was just dissolving into like a mush. And it's because the foundations of which I built my life, that 40 years, it was built on a foundation that was just crumbling. And I was going to have to learn a new way to see the world. Pretty much straight off the plane from Brazil, I went into hospital because my mental health had become so bad. And I spent a week in a hospital recovering from my mind. It's a terrifying place to be. When it's one thing when your physical health breaks down, but when you feel like you're losing your sanity, it's a completely different, terrifying experience. But I got through it, and then with that, in that really deep, dark depths of hell, you can rebuild, I think, gently and properly. And I'm very grateful to nature because it's a superb teacher. It teaches you all the right things in the right way. But when I came into the industry, I'd done some basic training, which I couldn't believe. You know, you only have to do a few 5-day courses on how to use a chainsaw, how to climb a tree, but nothing about the knowledge of trees. And I went into about 2 months after coming out of hospital, and I was really fragile still, physically and mentally, but I went into a full-time job in a large firm, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll be around loads of like-minded people that love trees, and it wasn't like that at all. It was all about how to get jobs done as quickly as possible. It was about the chainsaw and the machinery and the equipment and how fast can I climb a tree. It was very difficult because I didn't want to do tree work like that. I decided to set up my own company just because I wanted to be able to do work in the way that I wanted to do it, with the tools that I wanted to use. It wasn't really, I didn't particularly have any ambitions of having my own business, but it was born, I think, out of a frustration and a desperation just to be able to do what I felt was right for trees, to give back rather than just taking all the time.